I would like to just share with you a couple of resources that we find helpful for our alumni to be able to reach out to each other. We know that, we are still a small institution and do not have the staff to be able to provide you all with one-on-one career counseling throughout your time as an alumni, but we do have some great tools that I would really recommend to all of you to take advantage of. The first one will be our VLGS Connect, where we have our alumni directory. And this directory will help you be able to search for your classmates and be able to find them by specialty, by year, and be able to connect and network with them. I'm going to drop a link to the directory. If you have not already signed up, you'll have to go through a brief sign-up period, but it is quite simple, and we will do everything we can to make that process as fast for you as possible. The other tool that I want to bring your attention to today is going to be our alumni LinkedIn group. I just dropped the link in the chat to our alumni LinkedIn group, and that's just Vermont Law and Graduate School alumni. And on there, you'll find about 2,200 other SWANs, both some current students and SWANs all over the country and the world for you to be able to connect with. This is also where we like to post new jobs, updates about the school, and hopefully is a helpful tool for you. Beyond that, please know that us at the Alumni Office are always here to help you in whatever way possible. You're always welcome to reach out to us at alumni at vermontlaw.edu, or you're welcome to reach out to myself or any of my other colleagues in the office personally, and we're more than happy to help you however we can. Now that we've done the housekeeping, I would love to kick this off by introducing some of our fantastic alumni today. I want to start off by introducing Arturo Hernandez, who is a JD 07 and specifically works in employment law.
Good morning, everybody, or I guess good afternoon. So briefly, my name is Arturo Hernandez, JD class of 2007 at VLS, now VLGS. I am also a member of I'm a board member of the VLGSAA, the Alumni Association. We hope that not only do you get something meaningful out of this presentation today, but I personally hope that you follow along on the VLGSAA website or our Facebook page, and that you put your input in. We need more SWANs to not just support themselves, but to support each other. Those who are going through law school right now, and those who have completed their JD or their master's degree program. Those of you who follow along know that VLGS is expanding. We are now in Burlington as well as South Royalton, for those of us who were only in South Royalton at the time. I practice employment and labor law. I practice on the defense side, so I represent management and employers in business and employment and labor issues. But I look forward to providing you all some guidance, some information, and hopefully being able to answer questions that you have about just everything that's going on in the transitions, not just what we hear on the news, but everything that we're going through personally, because I've done that myself. And I look forward to hearing from you guys further. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Art. Next, I would like to introduce Michael Myers, JD 93. Mike is the senior counsel at the New York State Attorney General's office, and he has been extremely helpful giving advice to SWANs be they current students or alumni in their process when they're looking at transitioning into New York State government positions. Michael, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody, and shout out to my classmate Steve Saunders, who I see on the line. Good to see you, Steve. So yeah, as Brock mentioned, I'm at the New York Attorney General's office. I have been there in various roles since way back in 1999. It's kind of hard to believe that. But I graduated along with Steve in 1993, and then sort of bounced around looking for a job, doing internships and various things for about a year and a half, I think it was, until I hooked up with a law firm in Washington, D.C. Worked there for about 4 years as part of their environmental practice group before getting an offer to come up to the New York Attorney General's office. I was hired as a line attorney in the Environmental Protection Bureau up here, and worked on a number of state court and also federal court enforcement cases over the course of about 8 years. And at that point, I took a promotion to become the section chief of our affirmative litigation section, and so supervised about half dozen attorneys or so in terms of both federal and also state court enforcement work, and continue to work on those cases myself as well. I did that for about 10 years. And then in 2017, I took a senior counsel position within the Environmental Protection Bureau to really kind of focus my efforts on multi-state coordination and bringing federal court lawsuits. At that point, it was against the first Trump administration. So I think I'll come back to this a little bit later in response to one of the prompt questions. So I've been in that role of senior counsel since 2017. And, a lot of my work, as I mentioned, is coordinating with other states, with NGOs, and also helping to coordinate a lot of our federal court environmental work within the Bureau. So very happy to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate it. Next, I would like to introduce Pat McCullough. Pat graduated with her MSL degree in 1994. And Pat is a sustainability and energy law expert.
Hi, everyone. I'm really humbled to be on this panel, and I hope I have something to share that might be useful to some of you. I put my link to my own LinkedIn profile, and I'm going to not restate any of what's on there for the most part, but I'm in the 30-odd years since I was at VLGS. I've had 3 unplanned, so not self-initiated transitions, and I think I've learned a lot from each of those, and I have I think a better way of navigating that today. I'm actually in a transition right now. On February 5th, I was one of 8,000 Cargill employees who were, as we say now, RIFT globally. We weren't all in the US, and a lot of what I've done since then is support some of my colleagues who are also cut free. But I hope I can give you some lessons learned and some resources in our conversations along the way about what those transitions taught me. And I hope you'll feel a little better about where you are, whether you're in school looking for that first role or in an unplanned transition in your own life now.
Thank you so much, Pat. And last but certainly not least, I would like to introduce Torrand Collins. Torrand graduated in 2009 with her JD and MELP degree, and she is a legal professional currently going through a transition as she was previously with the Biden administration. Torrand, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Brock, and very esteemed to be on this wonderful panel with folks from my beloved VLGS, which I am managing. I've been practicing and practicing and practicing. So know that it is not just rolling off the tongue easily. It has been something that I've worked on for at least since things transitioned. So, as Brock said, I'm coming to you live from DC, being in the midst of a lot of transition. And as he said, I recently ended my service under the Biden-Harris administration, was at the Department of Interior, and before that was at the Department of Energy. So I got to utilize my VLGS degrees in wonderful fashion in the policy realm, and really helping implementation with the historic bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act. So it was truly the honor of a lifetime. But as he said, I am in transition. So I hope for those who are on the line that are in my position, or currently looking, or are looking to make the transition, I can offer some just insight from my own experience. And I see my classmate, the wonderful Tracy Lewis, on the line. She has been through the weeds with me since we graduated. So this transition is not my first rodeo. And I would like to say that, look, everyone, I've survived many. So hopefully I can just offer some nuggets of wisdom and just some encouragement as folks are navigating in the thick of it or thinking about transitioning. So excited to be on and look forward to a very fruitful discussion.
Thank you, Torrent, and thank you to all of our panelists. To kick us off, I would just like to ask a big or overarching question. What advice would you give to someone navigating a career transition, and what strategies have you found most helpful in making a successful shift?
Sure, I'm happy to kick it off since I'm in the midst of that now, along with my fellow panelists. I would say that there are a few things that I just jotted down. First and foremost, is staying positive. I think, and we're all aware of and conscious of how important it is to try to keep ourselves in good mind, healthy, happy spirits. Stay positive. We're in challenging times right now, regardless of where you sit. And I think the mind is the biggest tool that we have. And if we're not in a space where we are positive, it's very hard for us to push forward. So that's first and foremost. Have balance. I am treating this season as if a 9 to 5. So I make sure that I'm organized, but I also make sure that I incorporate activities and opportunities that would allow me to step away from the hustle and grind of finding a job. And that allows me to have a healthy, happy mind, to go in and be able to have, coffees, to fill out applications, to go to networking events, in which those things could be a little bit daunting and a bit draining. So make sure you have that balance. Also, I just want to highlight, I know that Brock already mentioned VLGS Connect, but utilize your resources and your networks. I had not always been as connected to that platform, but now more so than ever, I find myself going on and seeing what's available. In addition to, alumni associations at the graduate level, also tap into undergrad. I've been using that process as well, and going through my Rolodex to ensure that I'm making connectivity with each and every person I possibly can. Because as we all know, you can have a solid foundation and a great resume, but if you can have a person in a company, in local government, state government, federal government, that can really vouch for you personally and your work ethic, that is even more powerful. And getting the interview, or getting multiple interviews, or getting a job offer. So really utilize the networks that you have. Both from the education front, but also those organizations that you join. I shared with the panelists that being in DC, and knowing after the election where I would have to shift, really becoming more involved with a couple of groups that were in alignment with some of the work I wanted to do, and expanding that network really allowed me to connect to other opportunities that I wasn't aware of, or just gain more knowledge in my field as well. So utilize those networks and take advantage of those that are professional and just, and akin and aligned with what you want to do personally. And lastly, I will say, growing a new skill, if you have the opportunity to do so, or to hone in on the skills you already have when you're in a period of transition, please do so. I had always thought about getting certified in project management. So I took a course, and this time has allowed me to study and be ready to take the exam. And so that's one more added skill that I have. And you don't have to pay for a course. There are a lot of different certificates. There are a lot of different other other opportunities that are available if you're looking to make yourself, more marketable. And I think if you're able to have some downtime like myself to really, say a couple of months or a few months, it's helpful, and it's something that I'll utilize, beyond, and it's something I wanted to do. So carving out that space to gain a new skill, to hone in on a skill you already have is super important. And again, it just helps you look even, I believe, more attractive to employers, and multifaceted. So those are some of the tips I would have, Brock, for folks who are currently navigating, or even if you are looking to transition to a new career.
Thanks so much, Torrance. Does anybody else like to share on this top one?
Yeah, I have Torrent, I love everything you said. I would second all of it. One of the things I will say as a person who's, last time in a classroom at in South Burleson was maybe a few decades ago, keeping your resume fresh with those additional credentials. They don't have to be a full degree at all. It's one of the things the algorithms that now read our resumes and connect us as a viable candidate for jobs can be executive education. It can be some of the continuing legal ed that you've had to do probably anyway. There are credentials you can add that are far easier or less financially challenging to get, and add those to your resume. And they're not all professional ones either. But I think that's something I learned along the way. I refreshed my resume a few years ago with a continuing ed program at University of Pennsylvania that was all about interfacing with the board level people in your corporation. And it was really a good perspective to gain. And it's on my resume now. So
I can go. So a few things to share and really echo the advice that's already been provided. I think, it is very important to try and not get too discouraged. When I graduated, and I see my fellow classmate Susan Buchanan's here too, it was a tough job market. And, there were many of us who didn't graduate with a job. And that was sort of like a deflating experience. But I mean, I think you just have to keep in mind where you'd like to go, and, keep building your skills. Don't get discouraged. Be persistent. Remember that, securing a full-time job is only the priority of one person, and that's you. So, think about how you can be, persistent and sort of following up if you're waiting to hear from somebody, but at the same time, not be too much of a pest. Obviously, there's a balance there, but I think keeping in mind that, it's really, you're the one who's really driving the process. A second thing that I'll pass along is already been mentioned, the VLS Alumni Network. I found that super helpful when I moved to Washington, D.C. without a job. I had a copy of the directory, which at the time was only a paper directory showing my advanced age. But it was great for me to be able to look up alums who were in the area, especially in the environmental field, which I was really interested in, and had such a great reception from so many people that I reached out to. And I was careful to say, I'm not asking you to hire me, but if I could just come in and talk to you for 15 minutes about your job and how you got there, that was a really useful way to kind of build connections, get ideas. And, I think it means something that you went to Vermont Law. It's not this huge institution. So, I think you really should take advantage of that, per what Brock said at the outset. Two other things I'll mention: be open to internships, including non-paying internships. I know, if you're transitioning, you're just graduating, and you've got all this debt, there's a lot of pressure to really find a paying job immediately. But, sometimes it's going to take some time to do an unpaid internship. I got one in the White House Office of Environmental Policy when I moved to DC, and that really opened some doors for me. So while I didn't get paid for 4 or 5 months, I wound up getting a job in the law firm right after that. And I guess the last thing I'll say is, if you can publish something, that's also very helpful. When I was graduating, I connected with one of the professors at Vermont Law. We co-wrote an article together. That was something I could put on my resume and also something I could talk about in interviews. And I know there are more opportunities these days, obviously, to publish things online, certainly than there were back when I graduated. So that's another thing to consider doing.
So, there are so many positive and great things that were just mentioned, and they can't be said enough. I think one of the things we often, especially from an employment law perspective, I think something that we often limit ourselves in is, okay, well, I'm going to limit my contacts and my references to the professional world. So I grew up in Texas, moved to Vermont because it was close by, left Vermont and moved close by to Missouri. And I've been living in St. Louis or in Missouri for almost 20 years. And I initially, so a little bit of my background, I spoke initially about VLGS AA, and I also have trouble with acronyms all the time. I moved to Rolla, which is a city in the middle of nowhere. Small college town in the middle of nowhere, Missouri. I worked for the public defender's office for 5 years. My first year in Missouri, my wife, who's also VLGS alum, was from Missouri. So that's why we moved to Missouri. Moved from there to Jefferson City, and I commuted for an hour in rural back roads for 5 years. And then I moved to another public defender's office for about 2 years. And then I opened my own practice in Jefferson City. And then for 12 years, I was in Jeff City. COVID hit. My private practice, my solo practice, shut down, slowed down completely. Decided it's time to make a transition move, a career transition. And I moved to St. Louis, and I joined the firm that I'm in now. But one of my areas of practice is immigration. So I started off doing family law immigration. Now all I do is business immigration. But as odd as it sounds, oftentimes a lot of the restaurants that I went to strike up a conversation with some of the employees there or a neighbor down the road. And they may know something. People, if you go to synagogue or church or you have a religious affiliation or just social affiliation, Knights of Columbus or if you're a Mason, talk to the people that you associate with who are not in your professional connection, in your professional world, because they might know somebody who is in your professional world, especially if you live in a large city. You're not going to know everybody who is in environmental law or employment law or family law. If you live in St. Louis, I mean, there's thousands of attorneys here. I'm not going to know all of them, even though I may see them, when I'm in court. But it's important to have that information there and have that ability to interact with everybody that you meet, because you never know when it's an opportunity. And even if you aren't in the middle of transition, if you are a private practitioner or are in that mind frame, it's a great way to network. It's a great way to interact with others. One other thing I want to talk about, other than there's so many great things to be talked about now, is your resume. Not only is updating your resume a fantastic idea and should be done on a regular basis, not every month, but, it should be done on a regular basis, because your life changes. And even if you haven't updated your resume in years, it's always a good thing to have that update, especially those of us who still have kids who are younger. So you go from being, if you're a volunteer coach in your kid's soccer, for your kid's soccer club, that's a great thing to update in your resume. If you are appointed to, a city board. I sit on the Historic Preservation in O'Fallon, Missouri. I'm a board member, a former board member in Jefferson City. It's important to write those things down because, like all of us, we may forget what we did 5 years ago. And it might be something, it might be a conversation starter. And again, part of being in transition is being able to start that conversation. And the more fresh that those ideas are in your head, yeah, I used to volunteer for the YMCA, or, I was a member of the Moose Lodge, back 15, 20 years ago, or I was a member of the environmental, safety board in this or that location. So keeping those things up to date is always a really important thing, because everything is about conversation. Everything is about presenting yourself to people that you may or may not know.
Thank you all
And
for. Oh,
Brock, I just wanted to add to Art's point that he said about relationships outside of your network. In my transition, I've been able to to have good relationships with folks who didn't give me jobs. Making it to the final round, having multiple interviews. And actually, I was sharing with the panelists as we were prepping, that's how I got to DC. That's how I got to the administration. I had a job. I got into the final round. I built a relationship and rapport with the director at a well-known nonprofit organization in DC, and it didn't work out. And from that, I would still keep in touch. I said, hey, you all have this job. You have that job. I'd apply. Could you give me some more information? And then out of the blue, he reached out about this opportunity. So as much as you can, embrace your networks and people who aren't who are outside of your network. Also, if you have built a rapport with folks who are working somewhere and you didn't get the opportunity, stay in touch, connect on LinkedIn. If you see something that they're hosting, or if you see them in an event, and folks who've been in the DMV area know that everyone's everywhere. So you run into people a lot. Be sure to keep those open, because there are opportunities there. And I never would have imagined that, leaving DC the second time in 2017 and being in Florida and having that individual be on a call, they would reach out to me about a job that would put me back in DC in 2022. So just wanted to make sure that folks, even in the losses, that you find some silver lining. And if you can, utilize that as another resource, another touch point, another way to expand your circle and to stay connected and to hopefully, possibly have a job opportunity. So just wanted to share that, Brock.
yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Tori. And I think it's so great to hear that and know that, what might be seen as a short-term failure or a short-term setback can actually be a long-term success. I think that is just so fantastic to keep in mind. And also, to your point earlier, helps you keep that positive mindset when you're going through applications, because we know that, applying to jobs so much of the time is a numbers game. Next question for you all. And before I share this, I do want to share that, if any of our attendees do have questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat. I'm more than happy to scrap any of my prepared questions to respond to your questions that you have at the moment, because we're here for you. My next question for you all is, what should professionals keep in mind when transitioning from public to the private sector, or vice versa? Are there common challenges or misconceptions? And anyone who has expertise in this area is ready to welcome to share.
Sure, I could start off. So as I mentioned, I work first for a law firm, and that wasn't my sort of preference, but at that point, I really wanted a full-time job, and if I could get one in my field, that was great. I think, obviously I've been with the government now for over 25 years, and that was kind of my aim, to do public interest environmental law. But I think I recognized, in addition to needing to actually get some money coming in, that, the private sector law firms can provide a very valuable place to learn skills. They can be more willing to hire somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience yet and train them. And I found that while it wasn't sort of going to fulfill my overall career goal to, do environmental law in the public interest, it gave me really good training. I really improved my writing skills, helped me how to learn to litigate. And also I found that, the 4 or 5 years that I was with the firm went pretty quickly. And that was because the work was interesting and I really liked the people that I work with. And obviously those are important things no matter where you are. But I think I found the experience more positive than I thought initially. There's often perception, well, you're going to work for the bad guys. But it's not that sort of black and white. And I think if you are considering looking at the private sector, certainly considering taking a look, doing some research into which clients the firm represents is a very good thing to do, because I think that'll give you a window into the type of practice they have. If there are clients who are, businesses that you respect, then, I think that's a pretty good sign. So, that's one thing to keep in mind if you decide to go in that direction. I think coming to government, the expectation was obviously there are going to be fewer resources. You're going to be doing more stuff on your own. You're going to have more responsibility given to you. I think all of those things have been true for me. Government obviously can be a little bit more well-resourced than the nonprofit sector. But I think, that I didn't find that transition to be, certainly very jarring.
I might jump in here too. I started my career in-house. So I went from in-house to outside counsel, small firm, 3 lawyers. Then I started my own practice. Then I went back in-house in the compliance role of the university space. And then I subsequently moved over to the national laboratory space. And I think the big differences for me is I've gone from, private sector to, corporation to legal counsel, outside legal counsel, to back to in-house in the public sector, was that, as outside counsel, like, you're striving for perfection all the time for your clients, and you typically don't demand anything less. But when you're, especially in some of the private sector and the public sector roles that I've been in, great is the enemy of good, right? you don't necessarily have to strive for perfection. Sometimes, just leaving things to good enough is all you need. And that can be a challenge sometimes, making that mental shift from perfection to good enough. Most of the compliance programs I've worked with aim for like a B or B plus average, right? We're not shooting for an A plus program. So that's my 2 cents.
Well said, Aaron. I want to add in here a little bit more. So first of all, I've never worked in the public sector. So I've never worked for state or federal government. I've worked with many, many people in various government roles. But as a hiring manager, whether it was in the utility or Coke Industries, so talk about being over on the bad side, right? I looked for people who had public and private experience. I really looked for someone who was dynamic enough in their thinking and their experience to be able to move within those worlds. And I thought it was extremely helpful to have someone who had been on the inside of an agency to be working in a compliance role in the corporate setting as well, or in a corporate advocacy setting, if that's what the role demanded. So I think don't assume that whatever track you're on, it's too difficult to pivot and shift to a different perspective. I think you might be one of the more valuable perspectives at least in the corporate sector that I experienced. It's the same thing for pivoting laterally. I worked in largely energy for 20 odd years, and my big pivot was into the agriculture and food sector. And it was remarkable how consistent those were. But I had to learn how to speak a vocabulary that was a little bit different in a different industry. But I encourage anyone who's thinking creatively about how can my skills and experiences be used outside of where I've been traditionally in my career, where I thought I was headed traditionally in my my plan for what I wanted to do after graduating.
Thanks so much, Pat. Do any of our other panelists want to answer this question before we move on to the next?
So, I think there's a big misconception that I can't. I think that's something that a lot of us, especially in today's, market, I can't, or it hit me, and now what do I do? And I think it's okay. I've had 20 jobs in the last 25 years, whether it's being a sole practitioner or co-counsel or attorney for the juvenile office or special counsel, or I don't think there's much of a difference in the sense that there's not much that can be thrown at you that you cannot accomplish. You oftentimes we forget the great strides we have made as attorneys, or as students at not just VLS, but students of the methods that we have been taught. One of the biggest piece of advice that I can give to somebody is, if you are knocking and nobody's answering the door, make your own door. It's hard. It's not easy, but you can do it. You have the skills. You have the ability to persevere. And it's important for us to remember that you forget from that first year at law school to that last day of your 3L education career, or your MSEL transition, or MSL, or whatever, again, abbreviations, and they tend to get to me sometimes. You have accomplished so much, and you have learned, and your mind has gone from 0 to 5 billion in just a very short span of time. And it's important for us to always remember that no matter what, you can do something, you can find something, and it's not going to be the end of the world, even though it feels like it. And oftentimes your bank account and the bills may seem that way, but the fact of the matter is there are opportunities out there, small and in between and few, but there are opportunities out there. And don't limit yourself. And this is one of the other things I wanted to mention earlier. Don't limit yourself to your location. I'm not saying you have to move, but if it's not working out in your locale, it's not working out in the Northeast, we'd love to have you in the Midwest, or out in the West, or in the mountain states. Your skills are translatable to so many other areas of the law, and just areas in general. You can teach, you can manage, you can lead. There's so many things that are out there for you. Don't limit yourself, because it's always temporary. You can always transition again.
Thanks so much, Art, and I appreciate that. I want to kind of go to some questions in the chat and see if our panelists have any advice for or answers to those. With the full-scale assault on some of the previous administration's priorities and law and officials working on that at the federal level, can folks share thoughts on pivoting from federal service into other areas, states, municipalities, counties, NGOs, etc.?
Yeah, I can start. We have gotten a large number of resumes from attorneys, and actually also some scientists who were employed or still employed in the federal government. We do have some job openings, and I expect we'll have some additional ones during the course of the year. So please keep an eye on the New York Attorney General's website, where we have very prominently the job postings that are listed. I mean, that's only going to accommodate a few people, right? But certainly states are a good landing place, and it doesn't have to be AG's offices. You know, there are lots of, in my profession anyway, environmental agencies that hire lawyers as well. I don't have my pulse on the nonprofit scene as well, but I know just from the coordination work that I do, nonprofits are really trying to create space to bring in people from the federal government who they know are going to be super helpful because they really know, you know, the way the federal government works and also have particular expertise in various areas.
Thanks, Mike. I know that New York State in particular is very interested in hiring former federal workers.
Mhm. Yeah, I would add to Mike's points. Years ago, with the second stint in DC, I was having some challenges like, you know, Art trying to figure it out. And I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky, so I'm a Kentuckian at heart. And took a job with the Louisville Metro's Air Pollution Control District. And I am not one who practices, so I'm more in the policy space. I do a lot of work with cities and had done a lot of work with folks in the community. So I transitioned back there, and my 3 years there were incredible. So as someone who is always first and foremost, I think looking for jobs in the NGO space or the state and local government space. If you're a Fed like myself, it's a great transition. I actually had an opportunity that came up with that old employer. It wasn't the best fit, but like I said, someone I worked with came back around. They said, "We'd love to have you. You have expertise. You'd be great." And it's needed. So definitely, Tracy, NGOs, local, state is great as well. But there are a lot of cities that have funding, and they are looking for folks who are knowledgeable about this, you know, huge investment and what they're going to do with the money. And when I was at Department of Energy, that is one thing I did in Appalachia, was just to help folks connect to the dollars and understand how the dollars could work for their communities. So if you're in the federal space, you're transitioning out, and you're a valuable asset. And I highly recommend folks getting connected with those states. I know here, DC hosted, the mayor's office hosted a career fair, or I guess it was a networking event, and she was actually there. The city of Philadelphia, they came down, their mayor was there. The state of Maryland had a huge initiative. They have a resume bank open, and that's just, you know, within this small area, right? So if my home state of Kentucky and folks in Louisville government are looking for those with my skill set, you should definitely look at, you know, those others who are doing the same. And to Art's point, the Midwest, you know, there's a lot of opportunities. And if you're looking to really get in and make a name for yourself and do some incredible work, I think trying to get in those spaces, state and local, and then also the NGOs, which have different chapters across the country or international, are a great way. And they've been doing a lot of work to help bring us on board. So I would highly recommend it and think it is a great transition for folks who are in previous federal service or are looking for something different, because it is a different beast. And I think one of the things that I learned being in the federal space was that, you know, it's great, get the money out the door, but the real work happens on the ground. So if you're ready to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty and really work with folks to make change and to ensure that communities, those that are heavily impacted, those who have been disenfranchised, are receiving the benefits of this historic, you know, legislation, these laws, then, you know, get to look and get to applying, because the jobs are there and folks are welcoming you with open arms.
Yeah, and if I could add a little bit more about resources in these transitions related to that, especially if you want to pivot, especially if you want to sort of reshape your resume or LinkedIn profile to orient you in a different direction than maybe it looks, or maybe how you feel you've been headed so far in your career. If you are leaving an employer, if you're blessed, you might get some outplacement resources offered to you, and that might take a period of time where you get to work with Lee Hecht Harrison or Right Management, or even LinkedIn has some enhanced services. I know my current employer, most recent employer, gave me like 9 months of premium LinkedIn resources. And I really encourage, if you are offered any of those resources, that you embrace them. And you have to do a little work to figure out your way into those resources and what you really need, and what would be most beneficial for you. But there's a lot of resources now around the digital profile that you create for yourself. I had 15 years ago an outplacement coach tell me at that point in time that my LinkedIn profile was more important than my resume. And I'm not sure 15 years ago if I really believed that, but I do believe it today. And don't just make LinkedIn your resume, your digital version of your resume. It needs to be a little bit more of a tease, so somebody's interested in actually having the conversation or the interaction with you. So it's sort of a light version of your resume that just begs somebody to dig a little deeper into what you've done or how you're presenting yourself on there. I'll also say that artificial intelligence now has a whole new set of tools that are incredibly valuable. You can ask it anything and it'll take your resume and do things. It'll tell you answers to things that, might have taken weeks and weeks of work to get to now. And many times you don't have a former employer who's funding your outplacement. So there are DIY versions of this. LinkedIn is one of them. But also there are some resources that I think are phenomenally useful. Two that I want to mention here are, they have an Instagram presence and a website. One is Career Contessa, and the other is called The Female Lead. And I don't want to say that they're only oriented to a particular gender at all. They're great tools and they're universally useful, especially how to use AI tools to do things to your resume or your cover letter, or just digesting a job description to come up with what are the 3 problems this description seems to want to solve the most, or how is my resume most closely reflected in this job description. And I wish my whole career I had those tools, because I think it would have been a lot easier to do some of the things I've done. But really, and I think Torrin, you said this, it's your job now is to manage your time and your efforts and your curiosity and creativity in finding what is my next trajectory. And believe me, I know the pain of trying to figure out how am I going to pay my student loans, take care of my elementary school age children and my elderly parents who need to transition to assisted living, and pay the mortgage and all those things. Getting that next paycheck just seems to be the most imperative thing you should be focused on. But I also had a career coach at one point who saw this hot mess that I presented in his office, and in his intake and interviewing me, he said something I've never forgotten, and I'm using this in my transition right now. He drew this line on a piece of paper with his pencil, and he said he picked the point up at a certain point, he put it back down, and he continued to draw a line. I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And he said, this is your career. At this moment, you're where I'm picking the pencil up and I'm going to put it back down. It's such a brief period of time that you're in this transition. What do you want to accomplish? And I was like, I want a paycheck. I got to take care of my kids. I got to take care of my parents. This is what I want to accomplish. And he wouldn't let me get away with it. He made me talk about things I wanted to do with my time. And one of the things I finally told him was that my brother was in the Army. He was training in Hawaii for 3 months, and before he goes to his next deployment back to Iraq or Afghanistan. And I'd love to go visit my brother while he's out there. It's the only thing on the list I didn't do. And to this day, it's my biggest regret during that particular transition that I didn't just find the money to buy an airplane ticket and go out and stay with my brother for a week. And, it's like the one thing, why didn't I do that? And I look back now, it's like, I could have done that. It wasn't impossible. So I'm going to say that your mental health, your mindset is so important. And think about the things that you couldn't do if you were working full time. And maybe there's this thing, and it could be anything. It's going to be so personal, but it's the thing that when you look back 10 years from now, you go, oh, it's so great that I was able to do that canoe trip with my kid yeah, whatever it might be. It's so important, and put those things down on a piece of paper and make them priorities that you're going to fit into this transition as well.
Pat, thank you, for bringing up AI. I really appreciate that. I will say, as a caveat, from the employer's perspective, AI is still a tool that many employers are hesitant about. So, as with every tool, measure twice and cut once. Make sure that the tools you're using are the appropriate tools for the job. And, as every partner or every senior attorney in the world will say, please proof your resume, proof your writings, even your writing sample. Even if it's a writing sample you have submitted to a court or to an administrative board or something like that, if you haven't read it in 6 months, 6 weeks, read it again. Make sure it is appropriate, because nothing is going to get rejected faster than a misspelling, especially for a position like we have for ourselves, a professional position. And again, AI is great, but it's still just a computer, and it doesn't always catch. It's just like auto check, autocorrect. You just want to make sure it says dang instead of dumb. So, just my 2 cents.
Thank you so much, Pat and Arturo and Torrin and Michael, for all of your great words here. And thank you all who joined us for this conversation today.